It's Real Talk, Episode 10, Franchise Foundations. And I'm your host, Al the Movie Lion. On today's show, Post Wrestling's Neil Flanagan is back again to rescue a review for Shrek. My family, Sid the Cinema Sloth, is super serious to score Fast and the Furious. An MCU authority, W.H. Park, debuts to grade the movie that started it all, 2008's Iron Man. Now quick, leave a like, subscribe, and do you know the Muffin Man? Real Talk is powered by Real Digital. If you work for a brand or agency producing content, keep it real by setting up a consultation at www.realdigital.media to see how your next campaign can come in ahead of schedule and under budget. This review is brought to you by Post Wrestling, your trusted destination for pro wrestling podcasts, breaking news, and honest reviews on everything WWE, AEW, and beyond. Want to stay in the loop? Just search Post Wrestling on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. It's been nearly 25 years since the summer of 2001 when Shrek was released, so it can be difficult to remember what feature-length animated films were like before it, but the filmmaker's decision to perfectly balance classic fairy tale characters with modern pop culture references is an impact that is yet to settle. Shrek set a pace that forced all family-focused blockbusters moving forward to match, regardless of genre, and in many ways out-Disney Disney and Pixar's 2001 release of Monsters, Inc. and Atlantis: The Lost Empire. Shrek is as sharp a film as he is a green monster, and even on this I don't know how many have watched, I never stopped laughing at the jokes and their masterful delivery. Eddie Murphy is an iconic comedian and delivers a performance that is equal to Robin Williams' Genie in Aladdin, and Mike Myers subtly crafted an iconic character of his own that few saw coming. I almost asked the Real Digital team to relocate the studio to a swamp for today's review, but returning guest Neil Flanagan is way too much of a Prince Charming for that. You can catch Neil's work by subscribing to Post Wrestling's YouTube channel, but first, let's talk Shrek. Neil, how do you feel about parfaits?
I enjoy them very much, as does it. All Irish people. It's a pleasure to be back for the third time, I've got to say, Al.
Thank you. I was going to ask you if you could be a little more Scottish this time.
Green is very much a theme here. You know, I'm from, as I've mentioned before in a previous appearance, from the Emerald Isle of Ireland. You're in your jungle.
Yes.
Shrek's green. His swamp is green, you know, so...
I've got to ask you, just because this is a movie that's been out for a minute, when was the first time you saw Shrek? Do you remember? When did he get introduced to your green life?
I did not see, and I know that I did not see Shrek in 2001 in the cinema. A lot of people were saying, God, you have to see this. It's not the usual kind of Disney fare. It's very much subverting your expectations of all of that in many, many ways. And it's hilarious. But as I do remember seeing it, as soon as it was available for home viewing, like you said in the intro, loved it. As all my friends who had seen it told me I would, and have seen it many times since.
I mean, I mentioned in the intro, it's really hard to think of a time before Shrek. Like, it's hard to think of a time when he didn't exist. And really, again, the style that this movie brought in terms of that, just no holds barred, we will bring up any and all things from outside of this universe. And now that's just commonplace for characters to break the fourth wall, for cartoon characters to break the fourth wall and things like that. I mean, not to say that somebody's literally looking into the camera at any point in this movie and talking, but a lot of the references in the way this is designed, it was very, very, very fresh. So fresh that I believe it genuinely became the standard that everything sort of set at. The plot in this is sort of an amalgamation of your hero's journey and sort of all your various, fairy tale stories in one. So it's kind of straightforward and basic, but it's straightforward and basic in the way that the plot of Airplane is purposefully trying to lampoon all of these other airplane movies. Shrek is very much aware of what it's doing.
I think that's really, what you've said is very interesting, because I have young nephews and nieces, and if they, I'm sure they've seen Shrek. I know they have, in fact. But if they see it through the lens of the last, say, half decade or so, it doesn't have the impact. It's not going to have the impact on them that it did on its release, because this was a film, as you've alluded to, that really changed the game of these animated movies. It kind of forced Disney, I think, to rethink what they were doing as well, you know, and get a little edgier with their comedy and their, you know, perhaps musical style, all of that. In 2001, this was pretty, you know, somewhat subversive for the movie that it was. Notably, the first winner of the Best Animated Feature Oscar, I think, which was inaugurated in 2001 when Shrek won it.
Which is amazing to think that they introduce this award and it goes to a non-Disney picture right out of the gate. You would think that,
Yeah.
there were people probably pining for this award to be added for, years and years, if not decades, and they finally do it. And it's not even a Disney movie that ends up winning it.
Yeah, and not only that, a movie that takes not so coded digs at Disney, I think. Duloc, I think, is pretty clearly to me supposed to be, you know, a theme park, you know, a famous theme park. Let me get back on track for you, Alan. I mean, I think the plot is brilliant. It's a deconstruction of the classic fairy tale, taking the standard rescue the princess quest and just turning it on its head at every turn, at every opportunity. Princess isn't a damsel in distress. The hero is a monster. The prince is a villain. I love it. The pacing is perfect, full of really genuinely laugh out loud funny set pieces. And a surprisingly effective romance as well, which they do manage to get to, you know. And I think thematically, the final twist in the movie of, you know, Princess Fiona's true form
Yeah.
does take you by surprise, and just really the perfect thematic conclusion to this plot of, you know, we're going to turn this fairy tale land and its characters, we're going to turn them upside down.
And what a great message! Again, just you talk about this 2001 turn of the century. It is a fairy tale, and what is the message that it's delivering? And I think that final twist you're talking about is such a great message for kids, and such a beautiful message really for anybody when it comes to identity and standards and being who you are, and finding out who you are and being ashamed of who you are based on other standards. I mean, it really has a lot going for it that I don't know most fairy tales really do. I mean, it's getting into a level of culture that I think is over the heads of a lot of movies that are aimed at the exact same audience.
It's absolutely true.
Well, I'll ask you then, Neil, 1 out of 10, you know the rules.
I'm going to give the plot of Shrek a 10.
Love it. All right, locking it in. Now, you did mention that theme park that they were sort of poking fun at. I couldn't help but notice that the flags on the outside, they were white, they had a blue F. Now obviously this was well before social media, but it did remind me a lot of a certain Facebook logo, and it got me thinking. And often what happens when Al starts thinking, he'll come up with a game. And so I came up with a game, and if you'll indulge me, Neil, before we get into characters and performances, would you mind playing a little game with me I like to call Who Am I Describing, Farquaad or Zuckerberg?
I would love to play that game. It sounds like a great deal of fun.
All right, there's 4 rounds. We'll go through this quickly. Don't worry, folks. First round, you got to tell me, who am I describing, Lord Farquaad or Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg? This individual rules over an animated/virtual kingdom with rigid style guidelines. Is that Mark Zuckerberg or Shrek's Lord Farquaad?
I'm beginning to sense something fishy about this game. I'll say Lord Farquaad.
Hey, we'll accept that answer. It looks like either answer would have been acceptable, but we will take that. Okay, round 2. His entire empire is a parody of other ideas. Is that Farquaad or Zuckerberg?
Let's go for Zuckerberg this time.
Okay, yes, you are correct. That's well done. All right. Round 3 of 4. Who am I talking about? Lord Farquaad or Mark Zuckerberg? Shorter than Cameron Diaz.
Okay, good question. Let's go for Lord Farquaad.
That is correct. Yes, you're absolutely right. Technically, he is three dimensions, but only ever seen on screen. So he is shorter than her. Final round. You're doing great, Neil. By the way, you've gotten them all. So I hope you can get this last one.
Yeah, let's see if I can ace this.
Who is Al referring to? Referring to Lord Farquaad or Mark Zuckerberg? This individual flagged my account in college for spamming my friends because I thought I'd try selling Amway products for a while. Is that Mark Zuckerberg or Lord Farquaad?
I think that might be Mark Zuckerberg.
That's what I'm thinking, and he's still not getting back to me. But regardless, that's 4 out of 4, Neil. That's incredible. I hope you were all playing along in the comments. We're going to get your prize out to you. But the immediate prize is we get to move along to characters and performances. What did you think of the characters and performances in Shrek?
Mike Myers, what he created here, an iconic character. Shrek was originally pegged for comedian Chris Farley, but of course,
yes,
after his tragic death, Mike Myers was tapped in. I think that's a fairly well-known fact. What I did not know is that he initially voiced the character in his natural accent. We know that Mike Myers can bust out a very convincing Scottish accent. He's done in various movies, Bastard, of course. Yes. And I'm thinking, So I Married an Axe Murderer. He slips into the Scottish accent a few times as well. And this is, of course, because if not both, at least his mum was from Glasgow and spoke with a strong Scottish accent, and he was able to mimic this. The decision was made by him, that he wasn't, having seen the rough cut and having memories of having stories told to him by his Scottish mom, he had this idea to make Shrek Scottish. And what an idea it was. It's just, he's created an iconic character. And that to me is the stroke of genius here. Just this classic grumpy character with a heart of gold. And his journey is, we get this in some of these, in many of these films, but it's about learning to let people into his life. And his ogres are like onions speech, a key moment in all of that. I love Mike Myers in this role. Donkey, just one of the best comedic voice performances ever. I love Eddie Murphy. I always have. I'm old enough to remember when my friends at school had got his latest stand-up special on VHS, and he was one of the few American stand-up comics who had really made it over to the UK and Ireland, because comedy seems to be one of those things to this day, actually, where, comedians are kind of operate in their zone of influence, know, and
a bit regional. So,
yeah, we've got a whole slew of British stand-ups who I could name, who are very big and do arena tours that just don't cut it anywhere else. And I think the same goes in the other direction with a few exceptions. So Eddie Murphy, a comic genius, and this creation of Donkey's brilliant. Of course it's well written too, of course, has to be, but he provides most of the film's laughs. The energy is infectious. And he's the one who pushes for friendship and truth, throughout. Cameron Diaz does a brilliant job too, as this, for the time, rather revolutionary princess character at a time when Disney was still doing the very traditionalist Disney princesses. So the characterization, she's strong, she's capable. The fight scene with Robin Hood's men is a big highlight for me. She's not really waiting to be rescued. And she gives it a warmth too. And John Lithgow, he is hilarious. This pathetic little villain, and the overly dramatic theatrical performance, just absolutely perfect for it. So, I mean, if you can't tell, I love this cast. I love the performances.
So is that a 3 that I'm locking in? Is that what you're saying? I think I'm hearing a 2 in there, maybe.
It's a 10, of course, out of 10.
How do you? I mean, we're talking about Shrek. How do you not give the characters and performances in Shrek a 10? I totally agree. Mike Myers is doing a voice, like you said, he's doing a Scottish accent to bring Shrek to life. The other 3 characters, or the other 3 actors, rather, you mentioned, really not doing voices, just kind of doing a take on theirs. You might call that, acting. But they still, I bring that up because they're still very much creating characters. Eddie Murphy, of course, Shrek, I'm looking down. I mean, he's being Eddie Murphy, but so much subtlety in things in there. And Mike Myers the same way, where he's not obviously he's doing this accent, but he is really creating a character. I think that if you close your eyes and you listen to Fat Bastard talk and you listen to Shrek talk, context aside, I think you'd very much be able to tell the difference between the two characters because it's not just
Yes.
Mike Myers doing an accent. He is really creating a character, and Donkey and Shrek are just probably the weirdest looking yin yang you'll ever see, but they balance
Mm.
each other out so well, and there's just this the kindness and the excitement that Donkey has is matches the size of Shrek, but Shrek's just sort of he's so over it, kind of perfectly matches this little donkey. Totally agree. Cameron Diaz brings a lot of subtlety and humanity to this role. I do also just want to point out because whether you're a 90s kid or when you came up, there's a really good chance you've heard the voice of Jim Cummings. Jim Cummings is a legendary voiceover actor. Pooh Bear, just to name another, we're talking about people you might find in the woods. So this is still a time before every animated feature film is just A-listers. You know, even Shrek
Yeah.
having these four big names at the top, not crazy uncommon, but again, I mentioned Aladdin in my intro. Everybody knows Robin Williams. I maybe people would know a Gilbert Godfrey in there, but I think a lot of people would struggle to name any other cast members in a movie like Aladdin. Obviously, Toy Story, you start to get evolved a little bit, but regardless, I still thought it was really cool that there are a lot of voiceover actors still that you'll hear in Shrek, working voiceover actors. Jim Cummings stood out to me. He's sort of this Captain Guard at the beginning of the
Yeah.
movie, so not a huge role, but also just fun. If you're listening, you'll hear a lot of fun, familiar voices in Shrek. I'll move on to the visual storytelling, and I'll make this point before I get your thoughts, because I just brought up
Mm.
Toy Story. Anytime you're watching an animated film, it is going to age. It just is. There's no way. It's animation is relying heavily on the foremost technology at the time, which is always going to, in theory, be expanding and getting better. But good animation finds a style that maximizes its technical capability, but lives within those same capabilities. Toy Story is a great example. You can watch Toy Story 1, it looks a lot different than Toy Story 4, but it doesn't necessarily look worse. It's just a different sort of version. What I think this movie does so well is it watching it in 2025, it looks like a 2001 3D animated picture, but it's not trying to do anything it can't, so it all just feels like a style. I hope that makes sense. It doesn't feel like a time capsule, it feels like a style choice. You could say the same thing for the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You can go back all the way to the original rotoscoping and animating of Superman cartoons. It's just a different style, but it works so well. Clearly, it gets high marks from me. I'm curious what you think about the visual storytelling, Neil.
In 2001, this was groundbreaking, the use of computers to animate. But as you just mentioned, they established a style here that DreamWorks animation would become known for. And you mentioned this also when we were talking about characters, this kind of, the eye rolling, I've had enough of this, um, style. The expressive, slightly exaggerated characters focus on physical comedy within this. I don't even know how they do it. It's kind of a mystery to me, of course, as someone who's never animated as much as a flip book. But just to see it, I think, the designs are distinctive, they're expressive. Yes, they're 2001-ish, but they don't look dated particularly in the sense that, oh my goodness, isn't it so much better today that you don't
Right.
even really want to sit through this 90 minutes? It's not like that at all. Um, I'll say that artistically, I love, and we've touched on this, I love this satirical version of a fairy tale kingdom. Duloc looks, as we've mentioned, suspiciously like a kind of soulless theme park. It's a very clear poke at Disney. And I love Disney World, by the way. I'm going there in a few months' time. So It's not, it's, but I just think it's a lot of fun to do that. Whereas the swamp is rendered as this lovely, cozy,
Yeah.
desirable home, completely subverting your expectations. And as I said, on the visual side, I think they established this style that DreamWorks would continue with the expressions of the characters and the focus on the pratfalls, the physical comedy, the visual gags, the sort of I'm thinking of the Matrix
Yeah,
style
that
bullet sequence
when they
during Fiona's fight.
is it
Um,
almost is it a little more do you feel like it's do you feel like this is inappropriate to say that the DreamWorks animation style is almost a little more cynical than the Disney style? Because I feel like the Disney style is this very like big eyes, everything is supposed to be cutesy and round, whereas Shrek is it's everything is kind of like it's grounded in a bit of realism, like it's clearly exaggerated, but everything is
yeah,
meant to sort of make an adult laugh as much as it's meant to make a kid look at it and watch it for 90 minutes. Maybe
I think that's a
cynical isn't the right word, but I don't know, as vibe wise, that's kind of what I feel like when I compare the two.
No, I agree with that 100%. There's a slightly, it's cynical, but in a very playful way.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no nastiness, there's no kind of ill will in there. But yes, just a healthy cynicism, if you like, subverting your expectations. And I mean, I've used that phrase several times now, but in 2001, this really was kind of groundbreaking and has been very influential since, because so went the other big animation studios like Pixar and Disney. All to say, the visual storytelling here, I suppose, when you look at a 2025 animated movie, it could feel of its time. Like I said, I would reject the term dated, but as you explained at the beginning, not in a way that feels out of place, or you would present this to a 10 or 11-year-old and they would reject it in any way. It has a very charming visual style.
And even the jokes that it's making are fresh. You know, you mentioned this is 2001. It's making
Mm,
Matrix jokes. So this is a movie that's only a couple years old. It's not a lot of times when you have animated feature films that are making jokes geared for the adults, they're references that are a lot older and therefore they don't age as well. I think that one of the reasons Shrek holds up so well is because in 2025 it's making jokes about 1999 or the late 90s and the early 2000s. It still feels very fresh because I mean that's the equivalent of if a movie came out, you know, this summer, if it was making jokes about the Barbie movie or making jokes about Oppenheimer or something, you know, and even
yeah,
then there's probably more space between then that we're talking about so yeah, it was such a sharp picture that articulated everything visually so well. And the last thing that I'll say before I get your score is that imagine being tasked at any time with going, here's your list of supporting characters: a donkey, a gingerbread man, all these things that you've seen before, but everything in Shrek feels like the Shrek version. That feels like the gingerbread man. That feels like the Shrek Pinocchio. These are characters we've all seen before, and yet
yeah.
within this movie, they feel incredibly specific and unique to it, but also like a kind of a fresh spin on it.
That's a tremendous point to make. Pinocchio, for example, there's an archetype there in the Disney Pinocchio. He's instantly recognizable in this movie, but yeah, it's very clearly their own spin on it, and I think that's a real testament to the people who creating this imagery.
Visual storytelling, Neil. What do you give it 1 out of 10?
I'm going to knock a point off just to acknowledge the age, because the state of the art has moved along, and maybe that's unfair, but I'll stick with it. That's my logic. 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10 locked in. Hey, you. It's the gamble you make. All right, Shrek could have been live action, and maybe we would have been sitting here talking about it. We wouldn't even be thinking about it. But they went 3D. It's gonna age. Neil gives it a 9. How about the use of sound in this one? I mean, because we could talk about the sound effects, and there's a lot of jokes and things that are enhanced by the sound design. This is an animated feature, so there is no on-set recording. Everything you hear is a choice, it's a decision, it's a Foley artist. And then there's the music. I mean, my God, what an iconic soundtrack. People, you know, Smash Mouth was a big hit before this movie. I
Mhm.
don't think anybody after 2001 hears Smash Mouth and doesn't think of Shrek.
Awesome. And again, just subverting people's expectations of what a feature length animated movie is going to be, that instead of the sort of traditional, one day my prince will come, a whole new world, the kind of power ballads about love and all of that. We get Smash Mouth, we get the Proclaimers, we get Rufus Wainwright's cover of Hallelujah, we get a jukebox curated pop rock soundtrack that
Yeah.
give it, this contemporary uh, feel, at the time, appealing to the older audience. I think, but also boppy enough for the kids, who are watching it to like. And I think All Star, like you said at the start, the opening is completely iconic now. And I think what I would also mention is the orchestral score too, though, is excellent because
Yeah.
it gives that fairy tale grandeur that the pop songs then get to subvert. So when you just those two things together, I absolutely love that. And the comedic sound effects, I think, just adding punch to the visual gags, popping of the bird and things like that, the squishing in the swamp, all of those things are very, very well done. So yeah, nothing bad to say here. I will say, I think they also happened to, like, in 2001, they lucked out in some ways, I guess, or chose extremely well, because you could look at it a couple of ways. One is that this film elevated the songs that they chose, or you could say bit of luck involved in that they chose bangers that have sort of stood the test of time. The songs in this movie don't feel particularly dated; they feel like classics.
Neil, you are a pundit, if you will, for the good folks at Post Wrestling. A term in the professional wrestling world is the rub, that usually refers to when you have a younger performer working with a much older or established performer, and they kind of gain credibility as a result of it. If you're DreamWorks and you're introducing this cast, and like I said, half of it, or more, a lot more than half of it, are just these fairy tale characters you've heard of, and then the ones you have are a donkey and an ogre, there might need to be a little bit of a rub there. And I wonder if when we're watching the movie, if the soundtrack doesn't do that, if this classic soundtrack that is a classic to us from a pop culture standpoint, but not necessarily appropriate for a classic fairy tale, the blending of those two, I wonder if that doesn't sort of give Donkey and Shrek a little bit of the rub in terms of making them feel more like pop culture characters, where if you remove the pop music and it's just an orchestral score, this might be a really forgettable movie, or the characters might not be as impactful. But when you see, Shrek hitting the ropes to Joan Jett, it's like, yeah, Ronda Rousey, eat your
Mm.
heart out. This is, it feels like something that is, I don't know, as a continuation of pop culture. It's woven in as opposed to just kind of sitting there next to it, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. It's a tremendous point. I'm going to give it a 9, and the only reason it's not a 10 is because we're really talking about musical choices here, I think, as opposed to, and I should really get off my high horse, but the reason is, for instance, the last time I was here talking about The Shape of Water, the craft that goes into sound design is perhaps not. I'm comparing things that perhaps should not be compared. Perhaps I'm over
It's
explaining myself.
it's
9
tough.
out of 10.
It's a visual medium, I think a lot of people struggle. It's easy to think of your favorite shot in a movie. It's easy to think of your favorite performance. It's easy to think of your favorite twist, or maybe if your favorite theme. Pretty hard question if you ask someone, hey, what's your favorite film score? Hey, what's your favorite sound effect? It's just something that when people watch movies, much like the edit, if you're too aware of it, it's probably doing something wrong. So I think that's a really fair score. The last section, as you well know, is theme. Shrek's an interesting one. The last couple movies we've discussed when you've been on the show, The Shape of Water, Shawshank Redemption, some really heavy themes we're talking about. Shrek, it's not void of themes, but it is a lot lighter.
To me, I think the central theme is one that is great for kids and adults, and it's about self-acceptance, really, isn't it? And inner beauty, if you like. The film's message is basically don't judge a book by its cover, and Shrek learns to accept he's worthy of love. Fiona learns that this phrase that comes up in the film, true love's form, is that she's an ogre too, and that's her best self. It's a really powerful message. I think a really worthy one of it. about loving yourself for you are flaws and all, you know. I guess there's some sub themes here too, though, that I took a couple of notes. One of them is about subversion, and we've already talked about this, and I really think it bears mentioning as a theme because the film like relentlessly mocks the fairy tale cliches, and I guess the tropes. You know, the prince is evil, the monster is the hero, the princess basically saves herself. You know, so I think that this subversion of stereotypes again, that's a theme, and again a great message for kids and adults alike. Friendship's another one in here. This unlikely bond between Shrek and Donkey, absolutely central to the film. You know, they're looking past their differences to find common ground. And I'm going to sneak in um, the satire, the anti corporate sort of satire in there. You know, the Lord Farquhar's sterile, perfect little kingdom. Um, it's a direct satire of the sanitized, you know, corporate nature of some theme parks, I guess you might particularly at the time. I
Oh,
think.
absolutely. And even down to there's a character who is absolutely faceless. He's I guess, the executioner, but you
Yeah.
only see just enough through the mask to see that there's no eyes. And it would appear that it is another ogre, the only, maybe the third ogre in the movie. And I just
Mhm.
love that we have our hero who is this sort of big pear shaped ogre. But yeah, there is this clean cut, sterile corporate version of him that, you know, has no face, doesn't even have eyes, is maybe in physically better shape, but is only there to murder and only there to kill. And although it is such a tiny little detail,
Yeah.
that comparison of what Shrek should be in this world versus what he is, I think is
Yeah.
really, really profound.
For that reason and others, and perhaps the simplicity, which sometimes you know lends itself to certainty, I go for a 10 on the themes here because I just feel it's a wonderful message.
I love it, Neil. That's locked in. We got a 10. I gave the plot a 10, the characters and performances a 10, the visual storytelling a 9, as well as the use of sound a 9, and the theme a 10. That gives you a 96, my friend. That's one high score for Shrek. Do you
Yeah.
want to lock it in? Is it an A plus?
It's an A plus, easily.
Well, I have, if there was an unlikely friendship between Donkey and Shrek, not to say that you and I would be unlikely friends, but I think you'll appreciate what happens here. I gave the plot a 10 to your 10. I gave the characters and performances a 10 to your 10. I gave the visual storytelling a 10 to your 9,
Hmm.
whereas I gave the use of sound a 9 to your 9, and I actually gave the themes a 9 to your 10, which means we have the exact same score of 96. So
Wow.
Neil, the yin to my yang indeed. Yeah, look at that, my man. 296s, no average needed there. I've always loved Shrek. Like I said, I saw it a couple times the summer it came out. I was fortunate enough as a young lion to take some film classes when I was in high school, and believe it or not, they showed Shrek. I went to film school. Shrek was a film that was seen. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it somehow finds its way into all sorts of different discussions when you're talking about cinema, largely because I think Shrek loves movies as much as it loves being a movie. Neil, I love having you here. I'm so glad you came back to the jungle. I hope you'll come back another day, and um, perhaps then we can have our own adventure, our own fairy tale like adventure.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
Rescue someone who doesn't need rescuing or whatever, you know. But absolutely, I'd be very open to coming back. I've had a blast.
well, if you ever need a noble steed, I'm your lion. Platinum Plastic isn't just a proud sponsor of Real Talk. They're also the home for all our new designs and merchandise. Follow Platinum Plastic on Redbubble by clicking the link in the description and see all our A-plus gear. That's Platinum Plastic on Redbubble for all your Real Talk merch. How many writers does it take to win an Oscar in 2002 for Best Original Screenplay or Best Adapted Screenplay? If you answered 1, you'd be correct, and the names you're looking for are Gosford Park's Julian Fellows and A Beautiful Mind's Akiva Goldman. Okay, now here's another one. How many writers are credited for penning 2001's The Fast and the Furious? The answer is 3 and proves that filling a kitchen with cooks doesn't guarantee a good meal. The plot centers around the late Paul Walker, who plays Brian O'Connor, an undercover detective who you're supposed to like, and he's in love with Mia Toretto, who you're also supposed to like. Follow me here. Mia's brother is Dominic Toretto, played by Vin Diesel, and if I'm not mistaken, you're supposed to like him, even though he's the bad guy, and everyone in his crew hates our guy, Brian. But then there's Johnny Tran, who's a worse bad guy than Dom, but only because we don't like him. Dom is still technically a worse criminal, and we know this because the team Brian answers to keeps reminding us. And how do we feel about Brian's superiors? Well, if you're in Dom's crew, you hate them, and if you're in Al's crew, you love them for being the only bearable performances in this love letter to what 11-year-olds think are cool before they develop a sense of consideration. I'll pump the brakes for now while my old pal Sid the Cinema Sloth settles in to help me review this unbelievably sincere street racer heist action movie. Sid the Sloth? That sounds like a serial killer name. Is that what you are?
I prefer not to answer anything like that at all. This is Sid's voice. Didn't you know that? I was trying to think of how that played in, but now I remember the license. Yes. I don't know. Can we start over? All right, let's go.
Slick Sid Wayne, it's all staying in. This movie couldn't have moved faster for me, if you catch my drift. This, as you know, we talk about plot. We start with plot. You go ahead and you tell me what you think about the plot of Fast and the Furious.
The plot is basically just Point Break, really. It's like, okay, extreme people, undercover cop. And then it's like what's the point? What's the point of the movie? You know, it's like I have such a hard time. Like, it doesn't feel like anti-heroes. It just feels like we're supposed to like this person regardless of whether or not he's an asshole.
Who are we rooting for here? I mean, it's not your traditional heist movie where, I mean, I guess maybe it's trying to be, where it's clear that like Toretto's crew, you're clearly supposed to be rooting for them. I mean, he's literally just let go at the end, but it's still never clear to me why at any point in the movie would the undercover cop go rogue.
Yeah.
I didn't get, other than the fact that he had feelings for the criminal's sister, which I think makes him a textbook terrible police officer.
I mean, he really is. He's very hurt that they all hate that he's a cop.
He betrayed them.
Yeah, he exactly, you know.
To be fair, he was hit in the back of the head with a gun, drugged through, I think, a junkyard, and then asked if he was a cop at gunpoint. So if you're going to lie, I think that's an acceptable circumstance to lie. I mean, if someone hit me with a gun, I wouldn't think, you know what, this is somebody I need to really open up to.
That's true.
You can't really be mad at someone for betraying your trust when the conversation with the icebreaker was you trying to break the back of their skull.
Compared to Transformers, though, which we talked about last time.
Last time you were hanging out.
At least this movie is short and it flows fast. There's not a lot of filler because it's just point break, you know.
Let us know in the comments your favorite Catherine Bigelow movie. Let's skip to the end of the plot. At the end of the movie, Dom Toretto is in a pretty nasty car crash, but just bumps his head. He's just scratched. He seems okay. Paul Walker's Brian lets him go. He gives him his car, in fact. He fulfills his promise of giving him a 10-second car. And that's just where things kind of leave. I mean, I would like to assume that Brian and Dom's sister, go on to have a long life together. I don't believe there are any sequels to this movie.
It was a one-hit wonder.
One and done.
I mean, okay, even in the beginning, right? It's like, starts off with the action scene, with the heist. And you're not right. You don't know at this point who these people are. Not that it really would matter, but because I'm just watching, and it's like, why is this semi truck driver not just smashing these cars? Like, I can't even imagine. Just drive over them.
Yeah, I mean, when the car goes under the semi truck, just brake.
That's what I said. Hit the brakes, and semi trucks aren't high enough for cars to fit under. Plus, there's all kinds of things hanging under there. I hate that shit. You know what they go under in Christmas Vacation? It's a tree. It's a tree logging truck. It makes sense. It works. You know?
This is again why we have you on. In the last episode,
Yeah.
you appreciated the vehicles and
Right.
Transformers,
Right.
and this is the kind of expert breakdown that I expect from Sid the Cinema Star. Again, if you throw a grappling hook and you have a taut line, forgive me, but if the semi truck speeds up, would the line not go loose? Or if again, if he just breaks, the person on the other end of the grappling hook would just be drug in front of the truck.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty basic physics. Anyway, look, I don't think we need to waste any more time dissecting the plot
Yeah.
or the that particular scene. What do you give it? 1 out of 10, said the Cinema Sloth.
I give it a 2 out of 10 for plot.
2 out of 10. Characters and performances is up next. My God, did these characters take everything seriously? This is the opposite of a contemporary action movie where everything is a joke. There isn't an ounce of humor in this movie. I mean, the characters try to make jokes and they are not funny, but this is just so earnest.
Oh, they are, man. Yeah. It's horrible. I mean, it's horrible because it's again. I feel like it's a group of people claim that they're this family, but they're really just a gang. They're just like a biker gang.
And how cool would Brian have been if he understood what jokes were? You know,
Right,
but like
right.
his character, much like most of the characters in this movie, have no comprehension of volume in terms of loud, like, you know, how loud things are. And they have no comprehension of, again, humor or
No,
relax. This is
yeah,
a portrait of zero emotional IQ. I mean, these guys
right.
on the edge, if you question anything they're doing, they're going to punch you in the face just as
Yeah, everything is so they're so upset about everything. I mean, even the guy when they're driving up in the Ferrari, right? It's like he
yes.
knows it's a Ferrari. That's what he says to him. What do you got in there? Too much for you to handle. He looks so hurt when the guy says it. You know, he looks like he's ready to cry. Like, and then Dom's got to give him the permission. You know, because
Yeah.
don't forget, he's the boss.
Yeah.
Smoke him. And I've known people that like talk like that, you know. It's just like everything is bravado. It's just so annoying. I remember when that movie came out, I did not want to see it. We went with a group of friends to see it. And it's funny because now I think it's the best one of the whole series.
So there
Because
are more.
yeah, yeah, unfortunately.
There's a moment where Brian, Paul Walker's character, is in the undercover, like in this house that they raided from, you know, somebody who had a really expensive house. One of the cops or one of the detectives makes a comment about him dating one of the suspects, and he
Yeah.
attacks the cop. I would just like to say, I think it's a pretty pretty good red flag to point out if the detective is dating someone actively that's being investigated. And again, you talk about how like emotional he is. Why would you be offended by one of your colleagues
I
busting
know.
your balls a little about you blatantly doing something you
Yeah,
shouldn't
yeah.
be doing?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't mind people saying, hey, this movie is made for, again, middle schoolers, but what is it reinforcing? What are these ideas? What do these characters say when there's nothing between their ears? Their motivations aren't clear. We start talking a little bit about it earlier. How is Dom a good guy? Is Dom a bad guy? How is he even an anti-hero? Tell me one heroic thing about him.
He talks a lot about family.
That is very heroic.
Everything is like a monologue. Everything is like, you know, I mean, and the other thing is every character just has like a backstory. That's how they do character development in this movie. This happened when I was younger, and now all of a sudden it's like they get him now. Now we get him. You know, Jesse, man, I get him now. He told me this story. Now I feel bad about having to bust him because of this one story. And they all do it. They all have a backstory, and then it's like, oh,
How about Dom Toretto did two
oh,
years in the
mm-hmm.
same scene? He says, I won't go back. Talking about the 2 years he did in
Yeah, I know.
prison
I
for
thought that
beating
too,
up a
man. Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
He didn't even kill the guy. He is like just such a wuss. And that's what I think is so funny. Like everybody's afraid of him because he beat up a guy once. But
Yeah.
Paul Walker is an undercover cop. You know, these other guys are diving onto vehicles. Like, you mean they're
Yeah.
not going to get in a fist fight with a dude because he has a temper? I don't have a problem kind of picking on the characters in this movie because they just take themselves so seriously. And
Oh
in this
yeah.
movie that has nothing to say, why is everybody acting so seriously? This movie should absolutely be called The Fast and the Serious. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. The Fast and the Furious.
But let me ask you, Sid, because we got to keep it moving.
Yes.
Some performances. What do you give this out of 10?
Yeah. I gave it a 3 out of 10.
3 out of
And
10.
and the reason why I gave it such a high score is because of Ted Levine. It's because I love Buffalo Bill, man. I like Johnny Tran. He would because I like him. He's a good looking guy, right? And so I feel like, oh,
I think that's a safe thing to say. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he's a cool looking guy, and so it's like, oh yeah, and he was a Bond villain.
We're talking now about visual storytelling. This film was DP'd by Erickson Core. That is a real name. He was responsible for some other movies at the time: Daredevil, Paycheck, Invincible. Another again, if
Which
you're
one was Invincible? Paycheck, I didn't care for. Daredevil, I hated, and Invincible was what?
Invincible is the Mark Wahlberg movie. It is a football picture, very inspiring.
Mm.
If
Yeah.
you have a
Anyways,
glass of wine sometime and you want some cheese, maybe put Invincible on. But I throw the term time capsule around a lot on this show. But if you want to know what movies looked like in early to mid 2000s, this is what they looked like.
yeah.
This is the director of photography responsible. You're a car guy. I mean, did you enjoy that aspect of this movie?
Unfortunately, no. I love classic cars, and there was a time when I really didn't like a lot of modern cars, and that was the time when that movie came out. So I loved his Charger at the end. But since then, I've grown to really like modern sports cars. I go back to watch this movie, and I'm like, oh, but I hate all these cars. But I'm like, why? It's the graphics, man. 2001. Again with the Bravado. You're supposed to have all this shit under the hood, but then you got all your stupid decals on there.
What
And
about
so
Dom's
his
big?
70 Charger? Yeah, that car is amazing.
Yeah.
And then they destroy it.
Well, it should have had, if it was lime green or something, maybe it could have made the
Oh
cut.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean best scene in the movie, yeah, is that car going up on two wheels at the end. That's the best scene of the movie. Besides Lance getting choke slammed.
So, all right, well, visual storytelling, 1 out of 10. I mean, again, there's not a ton to dissect here. This is a fairly straightforward movie that's just lots of excuses to get to race scenes. I mean, the
Hmm.
race scenes, I'll be honest, they weren't really that compelling, and it's hard for me to hold that
No.
against the cinematography because I could have I there was no way in hell I could have actually been capable of caring less about these characters. But even inside of the races and the action scenes, it just really wasn't that gripping. This is 2001. There are some interesting moments where an ignition gets struck and you have this very like panic room sort of 3D where you go inside the engine and you can kind of
Oh
see
right.
the
Yes, that
combustion,
was so
which is
means a lot. But
very inspired, I guess,
yeah.
for the time and interesting.
Hmm.
That's kind of where it ends. Everything else
Yeah.
is just super. Oh, they just lean back when the car goes fast.
Yeah, it's just like a lot of close-up reactions and low angle shots of the car. Other than him saying, your granny shifting instead of double clutching like you should be. It's like they don't even really talk about racing.
1 out of 10 visual
Well,
story.
out of visual, had cars that had races. To me, it's kind of I gave it a 5 out of 10.
That brings us to use of sound. This movie, look, to be honest, the soundtrack is incredibly appropriate considering the plot and the themes. What I'm trying to say is it's equally idiotic. It is, celebrating all of these songs from 2001. There's some Saliva, I remember at one point was very distinctly playing. Of course, Ja Rule is not just a character in the movie,
I
but
know.
gives some tracks.
Wasn't a fan of the soundtrack. Yeah, and just wasn't crazy about any of the music in that movie. Yeah, you're right. It is very 2001. But also, I'm not always a fan when they use. You don't have to use contemporary music just because it is a contemporary movie in every scene. Filled with songs people like and of the time.
Well, it feels like
And
an exercise in like corporate synergy. It feels like whatever studio produced it also owns a label and needs to, or they own a Sirius XM or they own something and they just have all these artists and they just need to get it on a soundtrack, and it just everything feels so forced. And even in this soundtrack there's just a lot of music. There feels like there's more music than there needs to be. It's just, and obviously I don't think either one of us is a fan of the soundtrack. We talk about use of sound, and technically there is a scene at the party. I say the party. There's one house party scene
Oh, yeah.
where Brian and Dom have been riding together. They get back. They've been in the trenches now, and they get back, and none of Dom's crew has gone looking for them. Instead, they are all just having this huge house party, a kegger, and Dom's sort of like heavy. His right hand man is playing a guitar, just shredding. When Dom walks over to him, he is putting the guitar down. He has stopped playing it. The guitar sound is still going. As if he is still,
I didn't
but
notice
it's like
that. That's
trailing down, and it is
Yeah.
it was so funny to me. Where I was like, either there's a song playing and he was just holding a guitar and air playing.
He should have said my band started playing the wrong song.
Yeah, he should have robot danced off. Technically, the use of sound in this movie really lost points with me, because even for a lot of films, you point to and you go, hey, at least it's technically there. There's some legitimate, like, just bad flubs where there's somebody at one point when all the cars are entering, I think it's like one of the bigger races, whatever race it is, where the one guy in Dom's crew just drives off.
Oh yeah. And when I first saw that, I thought that was Giovanni Ribisi.
But in that scene, when Paul Walker pulls up, there's somebody who like bends over to ask him a question. The dub is completely off. Like when the dialogue is going, the guy's mouth isn't moving at all, and a lot of that is obviously going to have to be ADR'd because just the location they're on, the shot, everything. But they don't even attempt to sync it up, and it's I can't even give this movie technical points on the sound design because it's just cheap and bad. It feels like a big corporate movie. What did you give the sound?
Before I tell you that, let me throw in one other thing. Like,
Please.
at the end they're having the scene with the truck, and he's hung up against the door. The
Yes,
guy who's got the shotgun.
Yeah,
the
guitar player I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the guitar players. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm rooting for the truck driver, because
The
I'm
whole
like,
scene, right? I totally
you're like, this guy didn't do anything wrong. These people just fucking robbing his ass. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Dom is a bad person. His crew is
Yeah.
bad people. There's nothing redeemable about them.
And I remember thinking, though, boy, if they would have killed Vince in that scene, that would have added so much more weight. And I was thinking about sound, like they could have done like a really, that whole scene could have actually been like a Sam Peckinpah, some slow motion, super slow motion, where like the sound is still the same, and and just like super saturated color. I don't know. It felt like it could have been like almost like a road movie. It could have gotten, not that it has to be gory, but it could have had this burst of violence that would have been like, holy. But it's like, no, even that, really nothing happens. He's all right.
He crawls out of the car with a bump in the head.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty funny. But sound, I gave it a 4 out of 10.
4 out of 10.
Yeah.
I put it in. That brings us to theme. I consider you family.
Oh.
Family is a big theme of this movie, maybe the only theme.
Yeah.
I'll just ask you flat out, how well do you think they explore the theme of family in the original Fast and the Furious movie?
It's a family if you guys all just agree to listen to one person.
And that one person, by the way, is the only character in the movie who actually has a family member. That's his sister. And he's letting the newest guy in the group sleep with her. So if that's not a definition of what family should mean, then I don't know. I'm just glad my last name is not Toretto.
And the thing was with Vin Diesel is, I think the first thing I saw him in was Saving Private Ryan. He had that scene in Saving Private Ryan, and like he was great in that, So like I remember when this came, I was like, I wanted to like him, but it's just so hard. I don't know how he is, in real life. I'm not talking about that, but just
leave a comment if you know how Vin Diesel is in real life, please. Listen.
Yeah, yes, he.
Look, I don't mind saying I think my favorite character of his is probably Groot.
Oh yeah,
It doesn't require much of him. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, good for him. Good, get some points back.
Anybody who wants to say James Gunn is not an actor's director, I submit Vin Diesel as Groot is evidence to the contrary. What would you give the theme, unless you have any other thoughts you would like to maybe share before we designate a numerical value to the theme?
I gave it a 1 because I just it's not my thing. So
Movies
no,
having
no.
nothing to say isn't Sid's thing.
Well, again, like I said, maybe if it was actually about family, I might take it more serious. But it's like, again, like you said, they're so serious. They're taking it so serious, but it's like, but they're all just assholes who don't trust each other.
And with good reason, because one group is criminals and the only good one is an undercover cop. Yeah,
Uh,
no, this is a flashy movie that doesn't really have much more than flash. And I guess I what scares me is I remember when this movie came out. I remember seeing trailers for this with my friends in the movie theater and remember going to see it in movie theaters. I would have been in, I believe, middle school at the time, and it was one of those movies that just everybody talked through. Like the theater never got
oh yeah,
quiet,
yeah,
because
yeah,
everybody in the movie theater was 13 years old and there
yeah.
was nothing that could hold anyone's attention. And I remember leaving
Sure.
the theater with my friends and we all kind of agreed, well, that was a pretty lame movie. But there were so many kids at our school who idolized this movie and thought it was amazing, and they went and saw this movie and they started saving up for their first car, and they
Hmm.
started dreaming about the idea of being a street racer and getting the
Hmm.
girl and all this stuff. So I think this movie very purposefully exploits some, I don't know, pretty negative parts of the human ego and things. So I just offer that because feel free, again, as always, listeners, to let us know in the comments if you disagree, and hopefully you have a good argument.
Here, I'll tell you what. Though, let me tell you some. I'll tell you a good thing about it, though.
Oh yes,
Um,
please, you found one.
again, I know we're reviewing it and not the other movies, but I had to say the second movie is just like a typical sequel. I feel like the third movie takes place in Japan. It's a little
Yes,
different.
Tokyo Drift.
Tokyo Drift, right?
Hmm.
A lot of people hate that movie, but it's like it's no worse than this one. You
Sure.
know what I mean? And then I believe it's the fourth movie, and I don't know how many there are after that. But I
Mhm.
guess they become spies, they become government workers, they become superheroes. Basically, they basically have superpowers. I mean, what I mean by that is like jumping from helicopter to tank or whatever it is that they
Die
do.
Hard 4-esque. Yeah,
Exactly, exactly. And at least with the first one, I do like that. It's just a simple racing movie. It's a street
sure.
race movie. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, they do the whole
With the
heist thing.
exception of the heist, yeah.
Right, right,
The
right,
book ends the film.
right, right. But it's like and it tried to at least capture some of the racing. It's like if you like that scene, I totally get why you would like this movie, though.
This is kind of it's a movie unto itself. If you like this, you really don't have other stuff you can go to like it. So I can imagine
Yeah.
why the fan base would be clamoring for more. You gave the plot a 2. You gave the characters and performances a 3. You gave the visual storytelling a 5. You gave the use of sound a 4, and you gave the theme a 1. That's a total out of 100 of 30. Technically, that's a D. Are you comfortable giving it a D?
I actually gave it a D.
Wow. All right. So it all
Yeah.
aligns. We've got a 30
Yeah.
with a D. I
Hmm.
gave the plot a 2 to your 2.
Hmm.
I gave the characters and performances a 2 to your 3. I gave the visual
You,
storytelling.
di- you didn't give a Ted Levine point?
That old Buffalo Bill point. You know what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna change my grade right now to a 2.5 just to give a Buffalo Bill bump for old Sid. So characters and performances a 2.5. Thank you, Bill. Visual storytelling, I gave a 4 to your 5. Use of sound, I gave a 2.5 to your 4. And theme, I gave a 3, actually, to your 1. So that brought me to a total of 28 out of 100, 28 to your 30. I'm just going to go ahead and give this an F. Technically, here on the grading scale, 20 below is an F, but I just feel like this movie is bad for absolutely no reason. If anybody involved cared at all to make a story that had any weight to it, this movie would have been better. But I got to believe all parties involved were just hanging out, cashing a check, having a good time, and good.
I disagree, Sid. I believe this movie is a solid D.
You're Sid, by the way.
Oh, I meant Al. Let's try that again. I disagree, Al.
Well, then I'll ask you, Sid.
Not an F, it's a D.
Sid is locked in the D. What's an F? Give me an F movie. If this is not the bottom of your barrel, because I don't mind saying, and I'll lock it in now. I don't think, at least in this season of the show, where I'm gonna review a movie that's lower. So as of now, Fast and the Furious is my
Hobbs and Shaw, which is
Hobbs
the
and Shaw.
spin-off of the spin-off series of Fast and the Furious.
So that's an F.
That's an F, yeah. I mean, in four through the rest of them are Fs. I don't. They're all just horrible movies. This is a horrible movie too, but it's within the realm of reality to a degree.
Well, no, that's fair. Look, I gave it a 28. You gave it a 30. That's an average of 29. So, I don't know how many people who are watching the Fast and the Furious, especially in 2025, in good conscience, could really go much higher than that. I mean, feel free. Let us know in the comments why we're wrong here. But I just, it's not wrong to enjoy this movie. It's okay if it's a guilty pleasure. But to try to argue that this, as a piece of cinema, is quality, I'm sorry. I don't think you have a leg to stand on. I don't think you have a wheel to roll on. Sid, I appreciate you coming, buddy. I would make a joke about you racing out of here, but I know you sloths get a little, a little touchy about the speed comments.
Yeah, it's funny once in a while, but we hear it enough. Thanks for not making the joke.
Yeah, well, you see, that's how I did it. I referenced it. I didn't actually make the joke.
Yeah, that's how you get away with any joke. I was going to call you an ugly asshole, but I didn't.
No, Sid, as always, I really appreciate you coming, buddy. Thank you for hanging in there and watching this movie. I know the last couple movies we watched, I mean, you gave Transformers a B, so that wasn't too bad, but this one was a D. The next time I have you back, I'm gonna try to get you a better picture than this.
Something I can sink my brain into.
That's right, one of them smart movies.
One of them thinkers.
Let us know in the comments what a good palate cleanser of Fast and the Furious would be. But otherwise, thank you, Sid. Come back again, my friend, and we'll see you then. Before we jump into the next review, I just wanted to thank you for listening this far and ask that you leave a like if you're enjoying the show. And let us know what movies you'd like to hear us score on Real Talk. We're almost certainly on your favorite social media platforms, so search Al the Movie Lion wherever you scroll. This review is brought to you by Post Wrestling, your trusted destination for pro wrestling podcasts, breaking news, and honest reviews on everything WWE, AEW, and beyond. Want to stay in the loop? Just search Post Wrestling on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. How can a film spawn, at the time of recording, 37 sequels or related movies in 14 different TV shows, but also feel like a relic preserving something that hasn't been captured since its release less than 20 years ago? No doubt in part due to the success of Marvel Studios' cinematic universe, the tales of the 2008 Iron Man production have become legendary. Rather, it's the last-minute delivering of script pages to set, which resulted in an ensemble charisma not seen since Danny Ocean assembled a crew, or now knowing it would be legendary practical effects pioneer Sam Winston's last show. The movie truly is one of a kind. Although it is the bar that seemed to have been set for its predecessors moving forward, Iron Man wasn't without competition the summer of its release. Both Marvel's The Incredible Hulk and Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight were also released within close proximity to the Iron Hero. Critics and audiences agreed it was a hit, but also no doubt the second biggest superhero movie of 2008. But how's it hold up? Some of the music feels old for 2008, let alone 2025, but you could argue it's appropriate given where Tony Stark is in his character arc when it's played. That said, it's difficult to think of any aspect of Iron Man that doesn't feel a little bit dated, which is hardly a criticism considering its age. Now, if you'll please help me welcome a man who once rescued me from a cave via Iron Giant cosplay, walking comic book encyclopedia and Japanese pro wrestling historian, W.H. Park. W.H., thanks for coming, my friend.
Well, thank you, Al. I appreciate the invite to this jungle recording studio. It's the first time, but I gotta say, if I knew it was going to be this hot and humid, I I mean, it's like in Celsius, because like I'm Canadian, so we're civilized about what, how we measure temperature. It's like 45 degrees and like 70% humidity out here. But hey, you know what? I'll put up with it to be able to talk about some movies with you.
Now, before I dive into things, I want to let everybody know W.H. Park and I are, both comic book fans, but I definitely bow to you as a far more superior and knowledgeable comic book aficionado. I'm curious, do you mind explaining to me and the audience sort of what was your relationship like with Iron Man in 2008, the character, before the movie comes out, and how did that kind of impact you anticipating its release?
I had been hoping for Marvel to do something that was on par with like what like say Christopher Nolan was doing with the Batman movies, and to finally kind of coalesce everything into their own studios because of the business practices of Marvel in the 80s and 90s. They had to sell off the rights to all these different studios. So I think Paramount's the one who released Iron Man,
Yeah,
but through Marvel Studios, because they hadn't done the Disney merger yet. All the X-Men properties and the Fantastic Four were over at Fox until Disney bought Fox out. And all the Spider-Man stuff is still at Sony until I feel the inevitable, sale of Sony Pictures. You know what I mean? Like I feel that's inevitable, that Sony Pictures is going to be sold by Sony to Disney eventually, mainly so they can get. That's the only reason they bought Fox, was to get X-Men and Fantastic Four back under their own umbrella. But my relationship with Iron Man, the character, was like I had been enjoying pretty much the character in comics. I'm not sure the timeline of the run done by the writer named Matt Fraction and an artist by the name of Salvador Larroca, which is one of the best runs in the last, I'm going to say, 20 years of the character. But up until that, before that, after that, there's, definitely high points, low points of the character as far as the publications go. But like I've always liked the character, because if you could be almost one superhero in the Marvel universe, it could probably be Iron Man, because the basic
Right.
premise, you just put on the suit. I mean, you should know how to pilot it. No one's going to be as smart as Tony Stark, but here we go. Like, and he's always been a great visually striking character.
Oh, yeah.
And and I was excited to, because when they announced that it wasn't going to be Tom Cruise, because that was the talk before
Right, for a long
Robert
time.
Downey Jr. got cast. The talk was, oh, Tom Cruise wants to be Iron Man. In fact, there's like a run of a story arc called Extremis.
Yes.
And the artist, Adi Gravnov, designed Tony Stark to look like Tom Cruise. It's pretty hilarious in hindsight. But when I heard that it was Robert Downey Jr., I was like, okay, that's because famously he had a lot of problems with substance abuse, and the law. So like they're gonna hinge like this potential franchise on this guy. And you know what? After I saw the movie the first time in theaters, I was like, he knocked it out of the park. This is a version of Tony Stark on screen that's adapted, that fits kind of an image of Tony Stark that I had. When they said they were going to hire Jon Favreau and he was going to direct it, okay, this guy's has an amazing track record for being a director. So at that point, doing special effects work as well. So I thought, okay, they're in good hands. Stan Winston is on board to do the effects. How can you not trust the guy who did like the Terminator and Jurassic Park?
Yeah, my goodness.
So the two names for the writers stand out to me. That's Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby, because now I associate them with one of my favorite TV shows, which is The Expanse, because they were the producers and showrunners for the adaptation of The Expanse from book form into television. So they were part of the writing credentials of Iron Man. That's pretty cool.
You go to the movie in 2008. Clearly, you were anticipating it. You had some high expectations going in, fair to say. Did it meet those expectations?
Yeah, because I had very low expectations. Because like
you didn't like swingers that much.
I go in thinking a superhero movie is going to be bad, because for the most part, superhero movies tend to be bad. Iron Man is like something I was like, okay, hopefully it's good. And when it ended, I was like, okay, that was great. I really enjoyed it because I thought it was very faithful without being slavish to the source material.
Sure.
And it was It was fun. It was just a fun movie.
Ultimately, I want to know what you give the plot 1 out of 10, but I'm just curious from that initial screening, almost 20 years ago, how does it compare now?
I thought it held up really well. I actually kind of think, wow, Marvel should just kind of follow this blueprint a bit more,
Yeah.
especially with the way they do effects. The mix of CGI with whatever practical effects they did for the armor
Hmm.
worked really well. Also, I feel Robert Downey Jr. is trying to be Tony Stark
Yeah.
rather than as and I don't think it's unfair to say as time goes on and we get to Endgame, Tony Stark becomes Robert Downey Jr.
Let me get a score out of the end for plot, because then we could talk about RDJ and the rest of the cast and the characters, because there's a bunch to get into there. Just for the plot, WH Park, what do you give it 1 out of 10?
1 out of 10, I'm gonna give it a 7.
Moving on to characters and performances, you mentioned Robert Downey Jr., and I really do agree. I kind of forgot what's sort of preserved in this film in terms of a performance. You really do kind of get a version of Tony Stark that only exists within this film, because this film becomes so successful that everything after it is clearly a far more confident actor, like trying to do different things and loosening up a little bit with regards to the film. I mean that as a compliment, because it really is. You mentioned some other comic book characters. Just like with Superman, everybody's always going to compare whoever gets cast to play Superman to Christopher Reeves. Everybody's always going to compare, you brought up Conroy, but a lot of people are going to make the comparison to Keaton for big screen Batmans or silver screen Batmans. There could be 100 Iron Man moving forward. Everybody's always going to make the comparison to Robert Downey Jr. because he truly does create like an iconic character in this movie. You mentioned Jeff Bridges. Obviously, we have Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts. The director, Jon Favreau, is in the movie. Terrence Howard, I'll give you thoughts on him in a second, because I definitely gotta ask you about Terrence. And even a fun VO job by Paul Bettany.
I mean, I think the cast is fine. I think Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper is perfect. She dyes her hair to be a redhead to match the character in the comics, and she has a natural chemistry
Oh yeah.
with Robert Downey Jr. as Tony. So Pepper and Tony are meant to be kind of like this romantic couple that throughout for like I don't know how many years, decades of on and off,
Right.
and there's always this tension in the air between them. So I think they played that really well, and she's really likable. You can talk about how people feel about Gwyneth Paltrow
Sure.
as a person, whatever.
We have her candle line linked in the
You
description.
know,
Yeah.
I don't care about that kind of stuff. Like,
Sure.
what do I see on the screen? Does she bring what I feel the character should be to the screen? Yes. Is she likable in the role? Yes. Does she give a good performance? Yes. Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane, which is a crazy villain to pick. And I say this because he's not really thought of as an arch nemesis of Tony Stark. Because, spoiler alert, he dies in the comics like after the first major story arc between him and Tony Stark,
Sure.
and he's never brought back. He's never brought back. Oh, okay, that's an interesting choice to make Obadiah Stane the villain of this piece. But there's like a myriad of other villains you could have used, but they went with Obadiah Stane, which is a great choice. And Jeff Bridges is kind of a modern day Henry Fonda, the American good guy. He has a wide range of performances in his
Oh yeah.
his CV, obviously, but like for the most part, you tend to associate him with being a hero or a good guy, like you do Henry Fonda.
Lovable characters.
Yeah, and as Henry Fonda did in Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West, he plays an out killer in that, and his most famous villainous role, maybe his only really
Yeah,
villainous
I was
role.
gonna say I can't think of another one.
This is like his Once Upon a Time in the West for Jeff Bridges, in the sense like he plays basically an unredeemable, unlikable, charismatic guy that from the start. Okay, he's behind everything bad happening to Tony in this story. And if you'd read the comics, you know that anyways. But
Right. I really enjoy Jeff Bridges in this movie. He's so charismatic, but so evil. And everybody in this movie has such good chemistry with Tony Stark. I want to ask you before I get a score out of you, Terrence Howard. Obviously, he's in this movie, then he does not come back, and the role of Rhodey goes on to be played by Don Cheadle. I'm curious. This was the first time I have rewatched Iron Man and actually thought, oh, they were really good together. They have a bit of a magic and a chemistry that Robert Downey Jr. and Don Cheadle never have together on screen for a second, in my opinion. And I'm just curious, like, am I crazy? Am I the only lion in the jungle who thinks that?
I'm sorry. I will disagree with you. I
Sure,
think
please.
Don Cheadle and Robert Downey Jr. have very good chemistry with one another as
Yeah.
Rhodey and Tony, because like at that point when then Don Cheadle joins, he's going to be his equal, and I feel he becomes more his equal. Terrence Howard is not someone who has the CV of Don Cheadle, who doesn't have the reputation, and Don Cheadle as an actor blows Terrence Howard out of the water every time.
Hey, look, WH, I'm not here to compare filmographies, and I do have to make it clear I'm not suggesting for a second that Don Cheadle and Robert Downey Jr. don't have great chemistry. I'm simply saying in this movie, I think Terrence Howard and Robert Downey Jr. have better chemistry.
See, I will argue it's because Rhodey has a bigger role.
I'm strictly talking about performances, and I do think there's a magic that's captured here that I haven't seen in other roles. So I just feel like it's worth mentioning. Again, in terms of comparing resumes, Terrence Howard's got some pretty amazing performances in there that I do think bumps him up. Overall, WH, what would you give the characters and performances of Iron Man out of 10?
I'm gonna say 9.
9.
It's almost a 10. Yeah, no, it's a 9 because like to get perfect would be like, you would have to have Tony have his drinking problem addressed in the from the comics, and they
Okay.
never address that.
Okay.
And like I'm just watching like Tony just drink. And I'm like, okay, it's his origin. He still likes alcohol, and
We're moving on to visual storytelling. This movie does a really good job of balancing practical effects and VFX. The VFX don't age is super well, but what are you going to do? This definitely, even in 2008, is far from being sort of the S tier of special effects movies. I mean, you have Avatar that comes out this year, but it was setting a standard. It was trying to do a lot of things out of the gate that in some ways hadn't been done before. When you watched Iron Man, did you compare it at all to what you see today?
I think, in 2008, the special effects houses out there that the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years maybe even, have been just overrun. Everyone who works for special effects studios hate working on these projects, these big budget projects that require these insane deadlines. I think with this, the VFX team, studio, whatever, has a lot of room to breathe because they're not being overrun.
Yeah,
Right.
in large part because there is such a lift on the practical side. There's just less to do because
Right.
they're animating half of a suit instead of a whole suit, or they're animating, they're filling in windows as opposed to building a whole set. And it forces the filmmakers to sort of show some restraint. Whereas in a lot of movies today, I can see the confidence in the filmmakers because they can, quote unquote, do whatever they want now, but in many ways they can't. And there's this lack of restraint that's really unfortunate because the technology allows them to just go in a big green dome and kind of shoot in every direction. And to your point, then all of a sudden, these post studios have all this work dumped on them. And when creatives make last minute decisions, it literally tanks companies and bankrupts them. The process has evolved to such a point where it's eroding maybe some of the more important parts of the base.
A lot of the early Marvel films have this nice balance. As much as I like most of the Captain America: The First Avenger, there's some ridiculous scenes in there with CGI involving, especially when they're saying, oh, it's a 3D film, so he's got to do 3D stuff. For the most part, you can see there's care to try to do as much practical so you don't overrely, but also because the Iron Man suit is still a suit that he puts on. It's not nanotechnology. By the time we get to Infinity War, is now
Right.
like, okay, now this thing is now just beyond the realm of possibility because now it's in his, just in his wristwatch now. Pretty much every character in those two films, as much as I like them, are CGI. Doctor Strange is pretty much CGI. Spider-Man is CGI. It's ridiculous. Here is still grounded. Make it something that they put on. I feel that it's more heroic. I don't think it's cooler that it's like I can just press this, this button on
Yeah,
my
it's
amulet or something, and my suit's gonna come on. It's gonna be indestructible. Where's the challenge as a hero?
Well, and how do you connect to it as a viewer? I mean, in this Iron Man movie, we see Tony Stark working on a hot rod, before he builds his suit, and there is that visual connection of like, oh, there's a world where you could build this in your garage if you had $1 billion garage, with Paul Bettany helping you out. But when you switch over to the nanotech and more of this advanced technology, it kind of ruins it for the viewer because it's not that you can't suspend your disbelief that it's happening, but you can't really connect with it anyway. A lot of people have probably picked up a wrench and tried to put something together for better or worse. I don't know how many of us have ever pressed our wristwatch and had a super powered suit wrap around us. Regardless, though, I'm just curious to get a score out of you for visual storytelling. 2008, Sam Winston. I think this was ILM working on this, if I'm not mistaken. Solid edit. Jon Favreau cooking.
I'm gonna give it an 8. A large part of that is like the when he's building the suit in the cave.
Mm-hmm.
I love that part of the film. What makes Tony Stark special outside of the suit? He's a genius.
Yeah.
He's an engineering genius. He's got a DIY pacemaker put into him,
Yeah.
with the best battery operated, but then he builds his own. I love it because that's very practical. Like you can tell they try to make it as practical as possible. Wow, that looks amazing. Like they pulled it off, and and I feel there's this nice progression of the advancement of from Mark 1 to Mark 2. Obviously now he's in his own lab, garage, whatever you want to call it, and then he's building it with all the technology and resources that he has at his disposal, which is infinite from the kind of the practical side of the first 2 acts into the third. I think there's a natural progression of the visual storytelling with the suit, especially when he goes back to the Middle East, because like he's seeing that they're just doing all kinds of atrocities with his weapons, and he just feels so guilty about that. And I think I jumped out of my seat when he lands
Wow.
in the middle of that battlefield, and they're about to kill that father, and he lands there. I'm like, yeah,
It popped
yeah,
up
it's
great.
Iron Man. Yeah, it's Iron Man. It's like, and he kills it. I loved it. I was like, this is fucking Iron Man. This is so cool,
I've got the 8 locked in, and before we get to use of sound, I'll note, wouldn't it be great in one of the multiverses for us to live in whatever universe there is where Tony Stark has an Etsy page? Because I bet there's some pretty cool stuff that guy's whipping up. WH, I gotta ask you, what'd you think of the soundtrack of Iron Man 2008?
The use of music, the sound, the choices of the songs is cheesy. Black Sabbath, Iron Man, okay, sure. And I don't think of Tony Stark as, in my mind, who listens to like AC/DC or Black Sabbath. I tend to think he's more like a Radiohead guy or Pink Floyd guy. That's just me.
Sure. Well, hey, I mean, look, that's the fun of a comic book. You can definitely project your own things into it. And in this movie, Favreau is making decisions that you would kind of make as the reader. And I was less offended by the Black Sabbath, the AC/DC. And I didn't really remember there being as many of these just what felt like kind of just meaningless sort of temp tracks. Like a lot of it just has these very, again, what I definitely would label as cheesy things that felt very 2008, felt very dated. So of all the things that didn't really hold up for me, the soundtrack was probably number one. The use of sound I quite enjoyed. I thought that when we're seeing the suit kind of come together, the sound effects really helped enhance what was largely CGI at that point. Just you could hear the metal clicking together and rivets. I mean, it was a really like detailed, layered sound design. So as much as I don't really love the use of music and I don't think it's aged that well, I do actually have to praise the sound design. I felt like it was really effective and really brought the suit to life. Any standout sound effects for you, especially when Tony lands and and it popped you there? That's a pretty well designed sequence from a sound standpoint.
As far as the score goes, yeah, no, like nothing stands out about it. It's not like they got Hans Zimmer or John Williams to create the score for this. Plus the soundtrack for the songs they picked. Yeah, I mean that's like, I don't know, 4. I give it a 4. But as far as the sound design goes, like I think it's great. Because I think this sounds like what I imagined the Iron Man armor to sound, from the crude Mark One through to the a bit more advanced Mark Two, to like his final finished product that he gets, and when he goes into battle. Okay, and then the difference between his Iron Man Mark Three suit versus Obadiah Stane's Ironmonger, which is also kind of a crude thing because it's not designed by Tony. They take Tony's
Sure.
original
Yeah.
suit and extrapolate okay, but just make it bigger. So there's a difference. You can tell the difference in how both the suits sound at the end of the film when they have their clash against one another. And it's great. There's like a visual and an audio distinction between the two suits, which I think was done really well.
Use of sound overall, what do you give? Balance of the music and the sound effects.
Let's say a 7. I'll give like this actual sound design a 9, but
Right.
couple that with the music at 4, we'll say a 7.
That's a healthy average. No, I respect it. That brings us to the final category of theme. There's one theme in particular that I think really stands out in this film that really is kind of the backbone, I think, of a lot of superhero pictures. You actually said it earlier, but I'm going to give you the floor. If you had to identify one theme that you kind of maybe think Iron Man is largely built around.
I think personal responsibility. It's actually kind of lifted from Spider-Man's like famous line, with great power comes great responsibility. So there's this idea that Tony, he makes weapons. He just inherits the, Stark Industries from his father, who was a weapons manufacturer during World War II through to his death, I think, in the early 80s, as far as this chronology of the character goes.
Yeah.
And then Tony just takes that and runs with it because he's a genius, and he just makes better weapons and doesn't care because like he's enjoying being rich and smart and being famous. But then he sees firsthand, my weapons are in the wrong hands, and this is what the untold carnage, and it changes him. And you see the guilt of like, oh, my weapons are being used against people I never meant them to be used against. Now he cares about what's my legacy in the world. And I think that's where the character of Yinsen, the doctor who helps him in the cave, is so important. He dies trying to save Tony. He's like, no, my family died. You're implying that his weapons were used to kill his family. Yinsen says, don't waste this. And this stays with Tony. Like he's like, once he gets back, he says, Stark Industries is out of weapons manufacturing. It's great, and it's a great, I think, story and character arc for Tony. And it's like, that's great, because that's a Tony Stark you want to see, is like this guy who cares about like his technology being used to help people, to help humanity, not to like destroy them. And it's very true to the character in the comic books.
I would have identified it as guilt, I think, is really what a lot of the movie is about. And you said guilt a few times there, and guilt and responsibility obviously go hand in hand. I've got to ask you then, 1 out of 10, WH, last one to lock in, and then I can give you your score for the overall movie. For theme,
go with like a solid 8.
I thought maybe you were gonna stick it with the superhero landing. And give it a full
You got
10 or
it. It takes a lot for to get a full 10 out of me.
A lot of restraint shown from WH, and I can prove it because you gave the plot a 7. The characters and performances were your highest category of a 9. Visual storytelling an 8. Use of sound a 7. Theme an 8. That's a total of a 78. So on real talk here, that would be like a B plus. Are you comfortable with that? Is this an A plus, an A minus? What do you?
I mean, there's not that many A plus movies in the MCU. Winter Soldier would if we reviewed that, I would probably give that an A plus.
So just so all the listeners know, here's a little of a Kevin Feige size Comic-Con scoop for everybody. This is episode 10. We're getting into franchise foundations. Episode 20, we're going to be looking at sequels, and we're going to be talking about Winter Soldier. But is that an A then? It sounds like you're giving it an A, or you're giving it a B plus, or I don't know.
It's a B plus. It's
Okay.
a B plus. Yeah.
WH, we're very, very close in our scores here. For plot, I gave it an 8 to your 7. Characters and performances, I gave it a 9. I gave it a 10 to your 9. To me, this movie's got at least 3 or 4 really, really great performances in it, and I think Pepper and Tony and their relationship then as almost a third character unto itself, pretty iconic, and so that's worth the 10 alone. Visual storytelling, I gave a 7.5 to your 8, so just a sneeze away from the same number. Use of sound, I gave a 6 to your 7. Theme, I gave a 6 to your 8. So my total was 75 to your 78. I gave it a B plus. You gave it a B plus. Maybe I'm meant to be the war machine to your Iron Man, WH. Maybe that's what
Oh,
this
maybe
means.
the Crimson Dynamo to my Iron Man,
There you go.
or the Titanium Man.
I thought you were gonna maybe bring in like a lion themed character. I was trying to think.
Well, I think the only like animal themed villain is the unicorn.
WH, it was lovely having you.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you came by. For our listeners who, if maybe this is your first time hearing WH, you can check out the link in the description. We're going to have links to his work. But you're also, if you're here on YouTube, go over to Post Wrestling. You can check out his work. He hosts one of my favorite shows where he explores the history of Japanese pro wrestling. And there are other shows that you pop up on. There are also various kind of deep dive shows that you do that are on sort of more specific themes in Japanese pro wrestling, whether it's certain promotions or various things. So I've encouraged everybody to go over there and check out WH's work. I hope you'll come back to the jungle and hang out with me.
As long as you promise to supply me with air conditioning and some cold drinks, no problem.
Done. Thanks for listening, and here's a look at the scoreboard from our show. Neil Flanagan graded Shrek a 96 and an A+ to my 96 and A+, making it the highest scored film on today's show. Sid the Cinema Sloth scored The Fast and the Furious a 30 and a D to my 28 and an F with a 29 and D- average. Finally, Iron Man scored 78 and a B+ from WH Park and a 75 and B+ from me with a 76.5 and B+ average. I'd love to know your scores, so please tell me what you graded each film in the comments. A big thank you to Neil Flanagan, who joined the Three Timers Club and can be supported by listening to the Wellness Policy via Post Wrestling. Support Sid the Cinema Sloth by following our YouTube channel and leaving a comment. And follow WH Park on your favorite platforms now to see all his coverage of the MCU and Japanese pro wrestling at WH Park 9. Join us next time on episode 11, Jordan Peele, when editor-director Dominic Smith returns to chat Get Out, horror novelist Joe Belcastro scores Us, and Sid is back to grade Nope. Thanks to the team at Real Digital for producing this episode and Platinum Plastic, who supplies our show's merchandise on redbubble.com. If you haven't left a like by now, you might as well, and subscribe to the channel as well as hit the bell icon to be notified when Real Talk drops every week. Thanks for listening, and if you're going to talk movies, make sure it's Real Talk.
I'll tell you. Do you know the Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man!
Yes, I know the Muffin Man. Who lives on Drury Lane?